Pastor getting old, he done forgot. Yeah, I forget stuff. I sure do. I forgot it. So I got to go back to my office, get my car keys, go back to the car, get that out of the car, and come back. So I'm gonna keep talking. So this is the way life works, people. Sometimes you got to learn how to maneuver, you got to learn how to readjust, you're gonna have stuff that's just gonna happen to you. It's not gonna go like you figure. Sometimes it's not gonna go even with who you figure. Some stuff just changes. And when it changes, you have to be sensitive to the brothers of the word. We just brother, you need the word. Brothers of the word, you need the word. So get ready for a word that brings you power, strength, joy. Here's the word from brothers of the word. Welcome to Brothers of the Word, because, brother, you need the Word. And last week, I told you that those who watched or listened to sermon number 5948, God said something about that was positive. You had to watch and listen to it 3 times. And I told you I couldn't remember exactly what he said. I just know that I listened to it 3 times. And the sermon was entitled Thieve. It was from the T in the word thee in the series Peace in the Storm. And I've been doing a series about peace in the storm and taking each one of the letters of peace in the storm. So thieve came from the word thee. And last week, I actually did a part 2 of Thieve, where I told you to listen to part 1 of Thieve from the week prior to that, 3 times. And today, I am actually preparing a part 3 of Thieve. And after service on last week, I was talking with Darrell Hill. And last week, the message was simply entitled, Stay in the Light. And it had to do with where I was in another city, and I was getting ready to go out walking, and I asked the clerk in the hotel, was it safe to go out? And she said, yeah, it's safe depending on where you go. And I asked her, well, where is it I don't need to go? And she said, don't go beyond that last light. So the whole message was entitled, Stay in the Light. And last week, as Darrell Hill and I were talking, he said, what about the darkness? He said, so much of stuff comes out of the darkness. And then I heard just God speak. That's your message for next week. So today's message is actually entitled Out of Darkness. And that one message that God had said listen to for 3 times actually has 3 parts. So sometimes things get deeper and more intricate than we can ever figure. And God's whole meaning and its whole message and its whole direction for us is sometimes a little bit more complicated and longer than we figured. And I want to take for today's scripture just the first 2 verses of the Bible, Genesis chapter 1, verses 1 and 2. And all of us are familiar with these verses, but these verses are deep. It's what God starts his word with is deep. In the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth. And the earth was without form and void, and darkness was upon the face of the deep. And the Spirit of God moved upon the face of the waters. The NIV version of that, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Now the earth was formless and empty. Darkness was over the surface of the deep, and the Spirit of God was hovering over the waters. Now in those 2 verses, those first 2 verses of the Bible, There are 7 things just within those 2 verses. Number 1, God created. And that's what we need to understand about everything in this world. God created this. If you see a mosquito, God created that mosquito. My wife asked me a very deep philosophical question that I've still not got the full answer to, which was simply, why did God make roaches? But God made roaches. God made snakes. God made rats. God made all this stuff. So in the beginning, God created. So we have to understand that first 2 words, that first thought of in the beginning, God created. God made it all. So when you see another person, and no matter what they are, what you think about them, how they look to you, you need to understand God created. When you look in the mirror, you need to understand this is God's creation. So that's the first thing we need to understand, just by that first concept. God created. He created the heaven, or the NIV says the heavens. The King James Version says God created the heaven and the earth. The NIV says the heavens and the earth. I don't know which one is exactly accurate because they are kind of different. But that's another whole sermon. All you need to know is he made it. So he made the heaven, or the heavens, and the earth. Third thing, it was formless, which means it had no order. It had no structure. What we might call in a slang vernacular, it was a mess. So God created the heavens and the earth was formless. It had no structure. It had no order. It was a mess. Have you all ever been into something that God made, but yet it's just a mess? That's the way he started. It was a mess. It had no order or structure to it whatsoever. Number 4, it was void. Void simply means empty. It was nothing there. So he created the heavens and the earth. It was chaotic, without order. It was a mess. And then it was void, or it had nothing in it that we would deem worthwhile. It did have something in it because it had the waters and it had the earth. It was just empty stuff. See, sometimes you have to start with stuff that's empty. There's nothing in it that you can see yet. But it has all of the potential to be, but there's nothing that you can see in it yet. And number 5, darkness was on the face of the waters. Darkness, it was dark. Number 6, it says darkness was on the face of the deep, which meant the waters were deep. And the Spirit of God moving over the deep, dark, chaotic, empty waters. That's how it began. The Spirit of God moving over the deep, dark, chaotic, empty waters. That's how greatness begins. The Spirit of God moving over the deep, dark, empty, chaotic waters. Out of the darkness. And when we look at this, I actually had an illustration, and I just hear God saying, go get that illustration, because I left it in my car. So I'm going to go and get the illustration. I'm going to keep talking. AV, I hope my mic keeps going, but I'm going to go get it. I see sometimes stuff just happen. Stuff just happened. I brought the illustration. I left it in the car, but I'm hearing God say, go. See, stuff doesn't go like you figure. And you have to sometimes restructure, replan. I got to stand up here in front of everybody and say, Pastor getting old, he done forgot. Yeah, I forget stuff. I sure do. I forgot it. So I got to go back to my office, get my car keys, go back to the car, get that out of the car, and come back. So I'm going to keep talking. So this is the way life works, people. Sometimes you got to learn. You got to learn how to maneuver. You got to learn how to readjust. You're going to have stuff that's just going to happen to you. It's not going to go like you figure. Sometimes it's not going to go even with who you figure. Some stuff just changes. And when it changes, you have to be sensitive to the Spirit of God, because I would have, first of all, said, well, I can just do without the illustration. But then I hear God say, no, you go get it. Now, I put my fingerprint on the lock. The lock opened. Some things are going to open. Now, I'm actually getting feedback because I got the TV here in my office that's going. So I've got to go in, get my key, and go back out to my car, get the illustration that I'm going to show you that God wants you to see, because life just has twists. And some of you all right now, you're walking down the hall, and you thought you'd been up in the pulpit dealing with what you should have been dealing with, but no, you got to go back and make some backtrack because you done forgot something. Because you didn't do it the way it should have been done, and as a result, you got to go back out and do it another way. I'm opening my car door now. I hope the sound is still transmitting, but I don't know. And I'm getting the thing out. And the thing about it, I don't even see the thing in here. So which means I have taken the thing out of the car and I brought it inside and I forgot the thing. Now I got to go back and get the thing again. This is one of the best illustrations, and it may have been why God had me to do it. Because stuff just don't work like you figured it's going to work. And you end up taking a detour, taking a path that's way longer than you figured. And I'm walking back now to the makeup room to see, did I leave that thing in here or not? And they don't even know what the thing is. Here it is. Here's the thing. Now, to them, it don't even look like a thing. They couldn't tell what this is. It doesn't look like anything to them, but it is the thing God has me to show you. So I'm coming back into the sanctuary. This is one of the most unusual things I've ever done in the pulpit, but stuff happens. Y'all just look to the person, just tell them, stuff happens. Because stuff just happens. I am back. Now, I want to show you what God has for me to show you. Now, this is just a cup. And to those who are back in the back, this cup just looked like a cup. But it's not just a cup. What I want to show you is a few years ago, I took my company to a country called Curacao. We go on a trip every year, and I take the company every year. Well, while we were in Curacao, I took them on a submarine. And we went on a submarine, and we went 1/2 mile deep. Now, before we got on the submarine, they gave us a foam cup. Cup was about this size. They had us write our name and sign our name on the cup. And they took all of the cups and they put them in a mesh bag and tied them to the outside of the submarine. And then we went down in the submarine. 1/2 mile, roughly 2,500 feet straight down. And I was in the submarine. I had to actually lay on my stomach. You couldn't stand up in the submarine. And we actually went on 2 trips because all of the people couldn't fit on one trip, and some of the folk were scared and didn't go. And I don't force anybody to go to do anything when we go on the trips. I give them the opportunity. God will give you some opportunities to go to certain heights. but it's up to you whether you take the opportunity or not. So we took this foam cup that actually was a little bit bigger than this cup. And we put it in a bag. They hung the bag. The bag was like mesh. So it was, it had big holes in it, but the cups couldn't come out of the bag. And as we went down and when we came back up, they gave us our cups back. And this is the cup from years ago. Now you see, this cup compared to its original size is about 1/5 the size of where it started, because it was a big cup when it started. But what happened as we went down, the pressure hit the cup. And the pressure was so strong, when we went down a half a mile, the pressure was roughly 1,000 pounds, actually 1,100 pounds per square inch. So on this little cup, which is now, and the original cup was about this size, which is probably maybe a square foot in total surface area, that was over 12,000 pounds or 6 tons of pressure on this cup, and it made it into this size. This is what the deep can do to you. The deep is a lot of pressure. When God puts you sometimes in the darkness, in the formation, and when he says that his spirit hovered over the face of the deep, shallow stuff you can get out of pretty easy, but when stuff gets deep, it gets rough. And sometimes when we are in deep water, in deep stuff, it can feel like it's about to kill us. We're born or conceived in the dark. We are gestated for 9 months in the womb in the dark. And sometimes our greatest successes, our greatest development, it comes out of the darkness and out of the deep. We're put under pressure, and it is the pressure that makes us often who we are. I finished a book a couple of weeks ago, and the book was entitled Grit. And grit just talks about how it takes pressure and stress and strain to really make us strong and to develop perseverance. And it talked about how parents often make the biggest mistake in the world when they make the statement, I don't want my children to have to go through what I went through. I don't want my children to have to walk to school. I don't want my children to have to struggle and to have to strain. I want to make it easy for my children. And the book talks about when parents take that attitude and they try to make it easy and they try to make it comfortable for the children, what happens is the children don't have grit. And the minute they go to face something, it just crumbles them and it breaks them because they haven't gone through anything. But when you have to sweat and when you have to strain and when you have to deal with a whole lot of pressure on your neck and a whole lot of stuff, and it's like Richard Pryor said, folks say he got a monkey on his back. He said, no, I don't have a monkey on my back. I got a whole zoo on my back. Sometimes you have a whole zoo on your back. But this thing will develop and it will make you strong, and through the perseverance of it all, you become who you are. And when you deal with children who are born with a silver spoon and who never have to work, who never have to stress, and who never have to strain, the minute a little pressure come on them, they got to go to get some dope. The minute a little pressure come on them, they got to commit suicide. The minute a little pressure come on them, they can't handle it and they fall all to pieces and they go to pieces. And that's why, see, even now, black folk used to never commit suicide. We went through all kind of stuff, but we never committed suicide. Suicide was something we didn't think about because we had to go through so much stuff that toughened us up so much that when stuff happened that all the other folks thought was just so terrible, it's like what happened in the crash of 29, when you had all these folks jumping out of buildings and killing, and we're no black folk. If a black person got killed from jumping in 1929, it was because somebody else had jumped on them when they were walking under them. But they didn't jump out the building because we'd gone through so much. We were born in the middle of the deep and in the pressure, and we learned how to handle stuff, and it made you strong. I still work out with Ringo 3 times a week, and often my boys won't work out with us because they say, Ringo just too rough. He's just too rough. He's too rough. He's too rough. But it builds you and it makes you strong, and it builds your muscles and your strength, and you can handle some stuff. So when something comes along that's heavy to you, it ain't heavy because you done dealt with this stuff. It comes out of darkness. And some of us, we curse the darkness. We curse what God has put on us that has made us struggle. We curse that pressure. But that pressure, sometimes it will crumble us, but it makes us strong. And it's out of darkness that all things grow and are germinated. All of the food we get comes out of darkness. The seed is not formed in light. You have to put it in the ground and cover it up and water it, but there's no light. And when you go down that deep, there's no light. I was in that submarine looking out the portal, and it was pitch black. You couldn't see a thing until they turned on big floodlights. And then you see all these animals that have adapted to living in the deep, and they actually had developed little poles that come out of their head with a little light on the end of it. And the other fish would come up to that light, and when they bite the light, they eat them. It was a lure. It was a false light that gave them their dinner. So we got to learn sometimes that what we think is so rough and so tough and so dark is our blessing. That's why when you go to eat bread, rarely will you get dark bread. All your bread is light and fluffy. It has virtually no nutrition. That's why you can leave it out on the counter for a month and nothing will grow on it. But you get you some of that deep dark bread. You get you some real wholesome bread. We have that fresh bread shipped to our house, and a lot of times it has to be shipped priority because it cannot be shipped regular mail, because if it's shipped regular mail, when it gets to the house, it's molded. Because it's so rich, but it's dark. So sometimes in our darkness, it's the richness that develops us, that gives us the nutrition, that gives us the strength. So when something comes against us, we're strong and we can just laugh at it. And sometimes we'll see, I remember when I was in school and all of the other students were talking about how rough it was, and I just laughed. I said, you don't understand. I grew up, my daddy, I used to get up at 4 o'clock every morning, and I was out in the cold throwing papers, and I didn't get finished until about 7 o'clock in the morning, and then I went from there in the house. I said, when I came to college, the day I left, I got up and threw my paper out in the freezing weather. So when they were hollering about the classes, it was nothing to me. But my daddy had sense enough to understand I can't let these boys grow up easy and comfortable and soft. I got to put them through some tough stuff. I got to send them through the deep. I got to send them through the water. I got to send them through some places sometime where they can't see the light. I got to send them through the darkness so they can be birthed as men. And sometimes God will send you through the same thing. There was an optometrist, and he was giving the patient a consultation. Would come in, and the patient says, doctor, I'm having a hard time. I'm having hallucinations. Every time I open my eyes, I see really dark things. I see evil and malice and hatred and plague and death. And I'm seeing the worst in everything. Nothing looks like it used to be. Everything is just chaotic, and everything is just going on, all this turmoil and all this trouble and all this tribulation. Everything is just going wrong. And doctor, I came to see what's wrong with my eyes. And the doctor sat back and he said, I'm confused because every test that I've run you through, you see 20/20. 2020 was one of the toughest years we ever had. It was the year of the pandemic. It was the year of the plague. Most of us alive during the year of 2020 had never seen anything like it. But 2020 drove some people crazy. It drove some people out of business. The domestic violence tripled. So some couples, the violence just went through the roof. But on the other hand, some people, the house became more filled with love. Some people got more peace because they could spend more time studying. Some people got closer together. Some businesses prospered more than they ever had. The same 2020 that wrecked some elevated others. It was the same year. It was the same stuff, but you got radically different results. And one of the major things that the people who were in the hospital from the pandemic, they said virtually everyone by an overwhelming majority was lacking vitamin D, which is why during the pandemic, we gave everyone a capsule of vitamin D when they came into the church. You know where vitamin D comes from? It comes from the sun. Because nowadays, we don't stay in the light, in the literal light. So because we don't stay in the light, we get short on vitamin D. So when a flu virus hits our body, we can't handle it simply because we have not been in the light. You see, there is a time for darkness. But you are not made to spend most of your life in the dark. There is a time where you need to be asleep and regenerate and rest, and that's in the darkness. All sleep experts will tell you, make your room as dark as you can make it, and you will sleep better. There is a time for darkness because you're rejuvenated in the dark. But when the light comes, you need to get up, and you need to get out in the light. So there are seasons for everything. And you have to understand when the season for darkness is and when the season of light is. And sometimes in your life, you're going to go through darkness in order to get to your destination. Probably one of the most well-known stories is that of Tyler Perry. And Tyler Perry had a rough childhood. He was physically and sexually abused growing up. He got kicked out of high school. Most people don't know it, but Tyler Perry tried to commit suicide twice. Once as a preteen and again at 22. At 23, he moved to Atlanta. So when Tyler got here the year prior, he had just tried to kill himself. He took up odd jobs and started working on his stage career. In 1992, he wrote, produced, and starred in his first theatrical production,